Welcome to the 4F, 4Fs with Jeff.
Welcome back to the show. The story from today's guest spans continents, careers, and a few unexpected run-ins with public transportation and even New York's finest. Himani Naresh grew up between India, the UK, and New Jersey before landing at Columbia University and eventually making her way to Microsoft, where she helped build version 1 of SharePoint. Along the way, she's navigated being the only woman in the room, reinvented her career multiple times, and built a remarkable sense of resilience that I learned in this conversation shows up in just about everything she does. This conversation is funny, honest, and full of the kind of wisdom you only get from someone who's earned it through those hard lessons and perseverance. And as always, if you find yourself with no more F's to give, I got you covered. Let's jump into it. So I really appreciate you being willing to come on here and trust us with your stories. So that said, the podcast always starts the same way. Where are you from?
Yeah. First, thanks, Jeff, for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here. Being on a podcast is one of my bucket list items, so I'm glad that we made this happen sooner rather than later. Where am I from? I was actually born in India, but we left India. My family left when I was about 1 year old, and we moved around a little bit. I moved to the UK, moved back to India, then I moved to the US when I was 7. But when people ask me that, I really consider myself to be from the great state of New Jersey. I lived in New Jersey since second grade till post-college when I moved out here to the Seattle area. But yeah, I feel like I have a little bit of East Coast attitude, West Coast values. So I love both coasts and I visit there often, but Seattle is now my home.
East Coast attitude and West Coast values. I love that. That's a great mix to have too.
Yeah.
So if we could, you moved here when you were 1.
I left India when I was 1, but I moved to the US when I was 7.
When you're 7. Okay. So you spent a good amount of time. You said it in the UK?
Yeah, in the UK and India. Yeah. But I was very little. So there's not a lot of memories of things that I did there other than like pictures of me at 3 years old in front of the Eiffel Tower or something. But
that's neat. But so I'm curious, what was it that took your parents, I'm assuming it was with your parents, what took your parents from India? And also just curious, what part of India are you from?
Yeah, I was born outside of a town called Delhi. So I'm from Uttar Pradesh. And my father has a really amazing story. So he was one of lots of children, and he was the only one in his family who pursued higher education. And he actually got a Commonwealth scholarship to go study at the University of Sheffield outside of London. And so he got his PhD. And I was born in India, and he brought my mom and myself along. And then when we were in the UK, my sister was born. But he has an amazing story. And I've been to his village in India, and just seeing like where he came from and where he ended up in life is just amazing. And then we ended up in New Jersey, and that's where my brother was born. So we're a family of 5. And my whole family has gone off to do great things. But yeah, so, I've grown up with a mix of cultures and just feel very blessed.
So you leave the UK when you're 7, you moved to the Garden State. And what part of Jersey were you in?
So kind of the north part of New Jersey. I often do New Jersey by what mall you're next to. I know that doing New Jersey by what exit off the turnpike you're from is a common practice, but we didn't live off the turnpike. So we used to live near the Short Hills Mall in a little town called Berkeley Heights. And then my parents eventually moved to Warren Township, which is near the Bridgewater Mall. Yeah.
I like the connection with the mall, especially.
Yeah. There are a lot of malls in New Jersey, I think so. But it's about an hour away from Manhattan. And it was a great place to grow up. So
do you think that would be an interesting place to grow up? I mean, did you spend much time in the city, or did you mostly stick in the suburbs?
Growing up with my family, we spent most of the time in New Jersey in the suburbs. I don't think my parents were huge city folk, but once I started, kind of later in high school, was more mobile on my own without my parents, we would go into the city with my friends. And I actually went to school in the city. I went to Columbia University. So went from a very small, little town, sheltered life, and then got thrown into the Upper West Side. But it was great. I don't know if we should put this on the podcast, but I actually got arrested when I was 17 for jumping toll on the
New York.
New York.
Definitely put this in the podcast. let's go through this. So
Yeah, so I was 17 years old and it was Christmas time. And my friends and I went into the city to go ice skating at Central Park and to go visit the tree at Rockefeller Center. And all day we had been taking the subway. And one of my friends told us that we could put one token into the turnstile and 2 people could go through. So that's what we had been doing all day. And at the end of the day, we were at Rockefeller Center and we checked out the tree and we were, heading back home. We were going to go pick up our cars, which were in somewhere in lower Manhattan. And we did it again. And there was an undercover cop who caught myself and my girlfriend. And we were handcuffed for 4 or 5 hours. And it was quite a ride.
for 4 or 5 hours?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because it was right by the Rockefeller Center tree and they were trying to get a police van to take us over to the precinct. And because there was so much traffic, because it was right by the tree, we were there for quite a bit of time. And that was my run-in with crime. It was all over $1.25. So kids, crime does not pay. But it's not on my record. They actually, the cops were really nice. We were the only 2 girls who got arrested. None of my friends got arrested, but they let us go after a few hours of being handcuffed. But yeah, that's my my run-in with the law.
So you're just sitting there, like I can imagine, you're in a New York City subway station, just sitting there with your hands cuffed.
Yes.
They ultimately didn't get the car, so they didn't take you down to the precinct and do the whole thing.
They did, actually.
They did? So you had to ride in the car and everything?
Yeah.
And did your friends just bail? They just booked it. They're like,
oh no, my
friends
friends were great. They hung around. They kind of followed the cop car so that they could get us home, etc. They called my parents, which is another whole story. But yeah, no, they were really great. So it's kind of, I think it's the 25th or maybe 30th anniversary of that whole. It was 1995. So yeah, 30 years ago that happened. Yeah, over $1.25.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was like such a, you remember very well clearly now, but I mean, was it one of those things you're just like, this is a decision moment where this is never happening to me again? I'm like, this is terrifying. Or do you just think this is a joke? Or I mean, I think
I was pretty devastated when it first happened because I didn't know what was happening. And then while it was happening, like we were talking to the cops and we were laughing and, we're like, oh no, we're college bound. Like we were not your model criminal, I guess I would say. So it was very interesting. I laugh about it now. I laugh about it with my friends and family and stuff, but it was so long ago. But yeah, it's just a funny story. Yeah.
So you said the phone call was another experience. I mean, how did that go when you had to call your folks? So was this you're like in jail and they're like, this is your one phone call kind of thing, like just like in the movies, or what was it?
Well, it was, I was sitting in the precinct and we were just waiting there trying to figure out what their next step was. And then the phone rang and there's a frantic lady on the other end looking for her daughter, which was my mom. I would say going home, I thought I would be in so much trouble. But actually, my parents were really cool about it. They were just like, you were in handcuff for 4 hours. There is nothing more that we could do to you that's worse than that. So they were generally pretty cool about it. But it's always a good learning experience, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many times have people pretended their kid is like under 12 so that they can get the free meal, or you stood on your tiptoes to like be like 2 inches taller to get on the ride or whatever.
Totally.
So people do these things. Is it criminal? Is it, trying to save a couple of bucks? We were kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the equivalent of going 5 miles an hour on a speed limit, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's technically you're breaking the speed limit, but you might get a ticket for it, but also everyone does it. So
yeah,
I just want to know this. When you ask your friend, does she tell the story and she's like, I had this friend who was, was it really one of those things that was like, you're the mastermind of this thing, or was it?
that friend of mine, we're still really, really good friends. I just visited her in Florida and we just laugh about it. I don't know if she tells the story like I do. It would be interesting to compare notes. I should ask her the next time I see her.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So after you decide a life of crime, is it for you? And you I love it. And that's classic. I love that because that's a classic New York story. I mean, it's not going to happen anywhere else, literally. Like it's so unique to be able to go into the city and go ice skating. Like that's in every single Christmas movie or I think ever. There's a scene of the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center and the ice skating rink there. And I think that's just so iconic to do that. And then to cap it off with the
But I have so
Jumping the
many
turnstile.
train stories. I think I was shakedown for a bribe in Rome on the train station. I was almost kicked off the train on the way from Vienna to Prague. You know, I feel like trains and
Trains don't go well with you is the takeaway.
yeah,
So
I guess
I mean,
so.
was that so okay? So you're what are you doing in Vienna on the way to Prague?
Um,
First of all,
So basically, actually, to be fair, it was Prague to Vienna,
okay, Prague to Vienna. Okay,
and we had bought a ticket to the sleeper car.
okay.
And I thought that the person who would sell us a ticket to the sleeper car would also sell us a ticket to the train. But we got on the train and they were like, you have a sleeper car ticket. You don't have a train ticket. And we were like, what? This doesn't make any sense. Like, why would they only sell us one? And so they were like, well, we're going to let you off at the next station. Or I don't know if this was a shakedown for a bribe or not, but we kind of locked ourselves in our cabin. We did not get out and they eventually let us go. But I've also been shaken down for a bribe on the Mumbai train station. So yeah. So trains are a little sketchy, I think, sometimes,
But that one
especially in
was
other countries.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that one was an actual bribe, though. Is that the one
Yes,
the one you're for
I
sure?
think
So
I think so. I think
Can you-
Italy and Mumbai were actual bribes. Yes.
wait,
Yes.
so there's a third one here. I didn't hear about Italy. I want to hear.
Oh,
about
Italy. I think we just got pulled off the train and
Uh-huh.
they started speaking to us Italian, and then I had a friend with us and he gave him $20 and then he let us go. So I'm not even sure what that all was
Wow.
about.
Okay. So do you
And then
remember?
my father, he's been pickpocketed a few times in Paris and in Rome. So trains and us, I guess, don't get along.
It happens, right? I mean,
Yeah.
people are out there making their
They're hustling. They're making their
hustling.
money.
Yeah, exactly. So was there more to the story when you said you were in, was it in Mumbai? Yeah, where that bribe happened, or was that just another you're on the train and someone comes by?
That story was basically I had bought tickets to the second class train cabin, and we accidentally got on the first class train cabin. And I had asked the train conductor for help to make sure that I was in the right spot. And instead of helping me, got us off the cabin, took us into this little office, and I think was trying to shake us down for a bribe.
Wow.
So we eventually paid. I mean, when you're in another country, like, what are you going to do?
Yeah,
Right?
it's true.
Yeah. And this was before cell phones. So it's not like you're pulling your cell phone out and recording. So
Yeah, you're just trying
Yeah.
to not end up in a worse situation or a bad situation. You're like, how do I get out of here and get where I need
exactly.
to go? And
Especially when you're young, right? So
yeah, totally. That's it. That's so intimidating. But I mean, the cool thing, something I like here is that you had some intimidating experiences, but it seems like you're not one to let that stop you. You know, you're not going to back down. You're like, okay, well, this is hard and that was scary, but you know what? I'm still going to travel. I'm still going to do these things that I want to do. You know,
yeah.
I think that's
And I think now you can do a lot more research about like what tickets you need and how to get from place A to place B. You know, I think traveling has gotten easier. So yeah.
But when you're relying on you know, the Lonely Planet guidebook on your trip to wherever you're going or
Yeah.
whatever it was that you
Yeah.
used,
Yeah. They definitely need more information about like what could go wrong. Who, you know, who's going to try to scam you, who's going to try to hurt you,
yeah,
et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
that's a good point. Are you more of like a planner on your trips and your travel,
Oh,
or
I
where you
love.
just show up and wing it?
No. I'm a planner.
No.
I love
Okay.
planning.
It's I like the adventure there. So you're still going strong in Jersey, despite we're back to the timeline here, despite your arrest, you're getting handcuffed
Yeah.
after
It
jumping
turned
the
out okay.
turnstile.
So
Turned out okay. Yeah, they didn't.
it's not on my record, so it's
they-
okay.
Yeah, I bet. Did you have one of those thoughts where you were like, at the moment? Luckily, it's not on your record. Obviously, it worked out okay. But I mean, I've heard stories about things like that happening, and then they, you know, Columbia's like a proud and prestigious school. Did you ever think, oh shoot, I'm going to lose my tuition, or not my tuition, my acceptance, or anything? Or
I didn't think about it at that point. No, I was just trying to get out of that particular situation and just get home safe. But yeah, I mean, luckily it turned out, and I have a great story, and you know, I
It is
can
a good
laugh
story.
about it now. And I still have $1.25 that subway token because now they use the Metro card. But I do have that $1.25 in one of my photo albums. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you kept that. That's a really great visual representation of like, this is a
Yeah.
$1.25 subway token. I saved that day.
Yeah.
This is what it actually cost me.
Yeah. I don't know if this is the best way for us to start a podcast, Jeff,
This is
telling you
great.
what my criminal past.
No, this is great. And here's what I'm thinking. I
Yeah.
hope this isn't someday your kids are gonna like be like, they're gonna come back, or someone's gonna be like, hey, you're gonna be getting after them, and they're like, hey, I know that you actually got arrested by NYPD. You got nothing on me. I don't know. Okay, so all right, so how you stayed there in Jersey till you left, and you went to Columbia, and then what did you in undergrad?
Yeah, I studied computer science. I was a computer science major. And then I spent one of my summers working at Microsoft here in the Seattle area. And that's where you and I met. But I moved here right after graduation and have kind of been here ever since. So it's been like 26 years since I've been living in Seattle. Yeah.
Did you have a specialty that you studied in computer science, or was it just computer science as a whole? Or
It was just general computer science.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you got a job. Were you a developer for your
I
first
was a
stint at Microsoft?
developer. Yeah, that was my first job at Microsoft. I was a developer on a version 1 product, moved over to program management, and then actually stopped working at Microsoft and went off to business school and did that for a couple of years. And then moved back to Seattle because I got married to a great guy who was out here, and I've been out here since.
Nice.
Yeah.
So would it be okay if we double clicked a little bit, intentional pun there, on your work as a developer,
Sure.
and just kind of what that was like? Okay. So
Yeah.
look, so first of all, what was what product you said it was a version 1 product that you were working on?
Yeah, I worked on SharePoint Portal Server. It was called SharePoint Portal Server back then, but it was SharePoint. I think a lot of people may know it, but I was a developer. I was one of the version 1 developers on that product at that point.
Wow. Okay. Was this version 1, not version 1 of SharePoint as a whole, or was this version 1 of a SharePoint as a whole?
Yeah.
Okay. So before you were there, like no one was using SharePoint, and then
No,
everyone.
there was no SharePoint. Yeah.
Wow. Do you remember at the time, like what people were using for file sharing, or was that something that was still developing?
I think it was just like a file explorer, just like literally just file shares, right?
Wow. So if you weren't on the same network with someone, you were just toast. Like,
right.
There was no.
Or maybe you just email files back and forth. But I think SharePoint was kind of a groundbreaking product.
Yeah.
And, it really changed the way people collaborate.
So you were version 1 developer on SharePoint, and was SharePoint written in one of the Microsoft specific languages?
We wrote it in Visual Studio and C++.
So, but then you said you switched to program management at some point. What drove the change there?
I think this is a lot to do with feeling like I would be a better program manager than I was a developer. And I think a lot of that had to do with just my confidence as a female, being in a male-oriented profession and being actually the only female in that team, and just not feeling as confident as in my skills as an engineer. I always tell this interesting story. When I moved from developing to program manager, I had an exit interview with my boss. And he was like, you always lack confidence. And I was always like, well, I'm not as smart as, so-and-so, or I don't go home and write more code at night. Sometimes I have extra memory leaks, or I have extra bugs or things like that. And one of the things that he told me was that you're a great developer because we can count on you to do so many other things that other people don't do, right? Like we can count on you to comment your code. We can count on you to be in front of the customer and talk to the customer. And we can count on you to think about things holistically from end to end, from writing the code to how the user is going to use it. You can do documentation. You can do all the other things that a lot of the engineers don't do, but are really, really important. And so that was really eye-opening for me. And I was like, well, why didn't you tell me this before? Like, why are you telling me this on my exit interview? Like, why didn't you tell me this before? Like all the good things that I do that are really valuable. So I don't regret my career path at all. But I just, I just want to remind people, especially women, is that like we're always focusing on the things that we can't do, or we're always comparing ourselves to other people. But we really have to focus on the things that we know how to do well. And as managers, you really have to tell your people, and you really have to highlight the things that they're good at so that they understand their value add and are not just always comparing themselves to others.
I really like that. I mean, I think there's something to being able to hear, to see what other people are doing, just recognize, hey, there's value in what other people are doing. And just because what I'm doing is different doesn't mean that there's not value in it. But that's
Yeah.
a skill to gain in of its own. And I agree with what you said, that it's helpful to have that labeled and identified by someone else to help you realize that, okay, because I don't know, I mean, I feel like a lot of people are pretty hard on themselves. And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so that your manager was giving you a positive feedback about the
Hmm.
quality and the value that you bring to the table.
Hmm.
Did that resonate with you? Just curious how that kind of landed with you in the moment. I hear it now. Was it the same in the moment or?
I don't think it was the same in the moment. I just feel like when you make the decision to leave, you're ready
Yeah.
to go, right?
Yeah.
And you're ready to look forward to the new door that's open in front of you, and you don't look back. And so I took that feedback and I was like, wow, thank you for this feedback. I wish you had told me before. But I've always found that, I've had to reinvent myself many times in my career, but I found that every job that I've done has always been helpful for all the skills that I've gained from my first job have always been really helpful for my next job. So when I was a developer, all those skills were really valuable to me when I was a program manager because I knew how to write code. And then post business school, when I came back to Microsoft, I was in finance. Because I was a developer, I could do things in Excel that other people couldn't, which was also really valuable. And then when I went on to do mergers and acquisition work, which is where you and I met, all those skills, being an engineer, working, in finance, really helped me see things end to end in, the M&A part of my career. And so, I don't regret anything. I'm very, I feel like I've had a really great ride, and I don't think, I try not to look back. I mean, I try to reflect and I try to learn and I try to share as much as I can about what I've learned. And I really want to help other people, especially other women, kind of develop that resilience. But yeah, you kind of learn and you acknowledge and you appreciate and you tuck it into your brand and you go forward.
Wow. That's a very practical and positive approach to
Hmm.
your career. Yeah. So I'm thinking back to something you said as you talked about the transition from developer to program manager. And you said that something that was influencing your decision at the time was that you were the only woman on the team. And so I
Hmm.
was curious if you could talk me through a little bit about how that impacted your day to day, or just even maybe not day to day, but just how that influenced your experience. Because I think that could, I'm not in your shoes, but thinking about it, it feels like that could feel pretty isolating. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
I started working at Microsoft in 1999 when I was 21 years old, right? Um, I think that, and I had moved very far away from home and my family. And, you're just trying to navigate the world. And I think that when you're in one of those situations, you feel like you have to be one of the boys. Uh, and I've been at boys clubs since then too, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've been in a situation where I'm the only female engineer, but I've also been in a situation where I was the only female with a bunch of private equity guys on the 40th floor of the Embarcadero building, working on a, multi-million-dollar transaction. So, both situations have been intimidating, but that's one of the things I like to focus on is resilience. Is you may not have an ally in the room or an obvious ally in the room, and so you have to kind of rely on yourself, and you have to have that confidence to kind of push through these uncomfortable situations.
I agree with you. What I'm hearing here, resilience is important to have. But something I'm also thinking about is I heard this quote. I don't know where it's from, but it's like experience is what you need right before you get it. And I feel like
Hmm.
resilience in some ways is that way. You obviously had what it took to deal with those situations and keep moving forward. But I mean, how do you go about developing resilience or a mindset that can be prepared for that when you're not when you haven't experienced that before? I mean, the experience you just shared about being in tech, that's your first time.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. What was it? I guess what was it about? Like, what was it that helped you shape
Yeah,
that
that's a
mindset?
really good question. I feel like resilience is a lot of understanding who you are, what your values are, how you show up in the world, how you think you show up in the world, which may be different than how you are perceived in the world. Focusing on your priorities, being ruthless about your priorities if you need to be, being true to yourself, developing a support network, understanding that finding a good boss is just as important as finding a good husband or partner. And just kind of, it's cliche, but what's that Chumbawamba song? Like, I get knocked
Get
down, but I
down.
get up again.
It's a great reference.
Making that your theme song, right? And just realizing that you may get rejected multiple times. You may get a bad review. You may have to take a step back in your career. You may have to take a pause in your career to take care of someone, or if you just started a family. But just as long as you're taking steps forward, I think that's the path to resilience.
So when someone's looking at taking steps forward, I'm making a jump here because earlier you also said, you talked about focusing on your priorities and how that's important. I'm assuming that when you say take a step forward, you're thinking of taking a step in the direction of those priorities. So this is my question. How did you go about developing those priorities that you had in the moment? You're what, 22, maybe around this kind of time we're talking. And I know this is a developing thing, but did you know at that moment, hey, this is what I'm focused on. This is what's important to me. This is what I'm working toward.
Yeah, at 22, no, for certain, no. Right? At 22, I was out doing work, having
Yeah,
fun, trying to find a partner, trying to get healthy, enjoying a new city on my own, trying to make friends, all that kind of stuff. So at 22, it wasn't, I didn't have a very clear vision about priorities. I didn't
sure.
know, like, okay, promotion, the next level, becoming a senior manager, then becoming a director. I didn't know, there's not a lot of people out there to guide you at that age. I don't think. I think it's more like when you hit your 30s is when you kind of like develop a little bit more maturity. And when you start thinking about things, when you start thinking about like having a family and, about getting that promotion and about buying property and kind of establishing yourself, I think that's when things try to start to get a little bit more clear as to what your priorities are. But one of the things that I always say is that, your path is not a straight line. I think your career, your life is a series of strategic and tactical left and right turns. Sometimes you're going to take a job because you want to fill a gap on your resume. Or sometimes, someone just taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, I think you'd be great at this. So you move in that direction, even though that wasn't your original plan. Or sometimes, you've started a family and you need to take a step back. Or, sometimes you have to move to a different state because of personal reasons and you kind of take whatever's there. And so I think a lot of people think that like, okay, I'm going to work really hard in 15 years. I'm going to become, CEO or CFO, but it's not. Like, I have changed careers. I've had to reinvent myself multiple times. I think everybody's reinventing themselves right now as they kind of move the shift to AI and they're trying to figure out how to retool. And so, your career, I've had to reinvent myself within one day. I think like there were times when I was like, I just worked on $1 million transaction, but I just care about whether my kid can poo in the potty, And so like you are wearing different hats every day. And it's just not a straight line. It's like you're just juggling multiple things. And I think women and men face this in their careers and life. But yeah, I don't think the priority is really established until my 30s and then later in my 40s. And then right now, in my late 40s, I'm trying to figure out, well, what's career 2.0 look like? What is the mark that I want to leave in this world as I kind of have another 15 years left before retirement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like I mean, maybe they weren't defined in the terms of, career priorities or these are 3 things I want to accomplish. But I mean, you knew you didn't have your focus when you were in your 20s. You were experiencing a new city. You knew that that was important. You knew that you
Mhm.
wanted what you want to do, and you were focused on meeting new people, making friends, and having a good experience. And then your priorities started to develop and materialize towards, professionally and career and a family and otherwise as those things took shape and you grew and had, I guess, more bandwidth to focus on them. But what I also heard you say is that your priorities in some ways, maybe even not if this was intentional material effort, an intentional effort, but it seems like in some ways have shifted over time. When you have little kids and you're worried about, they're feeling terrible, that's like everything else takes a backseat immediately.
Mhm.
And so now your priorities are, I'm jumping in way ahead. Now your priorities are what's 2.0 look like. I'm just glad you brought that up, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
I think that's good and important to acknowledge that you can change, you can shift, you become a different person, you can change your priorities.
Right.
Um, I like that. Okay. So on this notion of setting your priorities, have you ever been through like an experience or something? And I'm thinking it could be any time in your life or career where this has been like a really intentional effort where you've kind of sat down or just spent some time just really figuring out and defining what you what you wanted to do or what those priorities were? I keep using that word priorities. It could be goals. It could be whatever you want. I'm just curious if that's ever been something you've done intentionally.
I think that I have. I've certainly wanted to get to certain levels in my career. I was very lucky. I've had really good upward career mobility. My last role was I was a VP at a global media company. And I think that, all of those have been milestones that I feel like I've strived towards and I've tried to hit. In terms of like my job function, I think that those have just kind of landed on my lap. It's a little bit, maybe we can talk about networking because I feel like that's so
Let's talk
important.
about it. Yeah.
But I think that, there's never been like, well, this is what I want to do. I've had like I said before, like my career has not been a straight line. It's been a jungle gym. It's been, kind of all over the place. I've been from engineering to finance to mergers and acquisitions to chief of staff. Now I'm doing nonprofit work. And so it's never been a straight line. And I think I've always looked at doors that have been open to me and have said, hey, that looks really interesting. Let me try that. Let me see if I can do that. I've tried not to shut doors that have been, open for me. I've, just gone through them with an open heart and like, let's see what I can learn here. And like I mentioned before, every job that I've had has given me skills that have been applicable to future jobs. I think that's just the career path that I've taken. I know a lot of people have that straight line trajectory, and that's certainly a lot easier. They start off as an engineering and they head up to becoming an engineering manager, or they start off in sales and they're, off to becoming chief revenue officer. And I think that's really, really great because that's really great for them because that's a set path and they know what they're doing. And, that's been wonderful. For me, I've always taken kind of a, hey, this seems interesting. Let me try this. Let me see what will happen here. And fortunately, more times than not, it's worked out. But I can't say that I've had like this is my goal. This is what I want to achieve. And I envy those people who do have that. I've just been kind of out there with an open heart and let me say like, this seems interesting. Let's try it. Let's see what happens.
I think I also, for what it's worth, really envy people who have just been able to.
They know what their North Star is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really, especially from a career, anyway, I really respect.
I mean, you're doing it too, right? Like you're going from working at a tech company to be a podcaster. That's a huge thing.
I don't know. Besides, this podcast isn't about me. So, but have you had any of those times? And I like that you've just been open to like, okay, there's a door that's open. Let's kind of go there.
Yeah.
And obviously your career's worked out well. You've had great career trajectory. Have there been any of those, I don't know what to call them, but kind of it's called a side story or just an offshoot of that where you walked through a door and you've realized pretty quickly or at some point like, oh yeah, no, this isn't where I had to be. And I'm just curious how you came to that realization. And if there was anything there.
I have, but oftentimes it's not really the job. It's a lot more about the culture or the people that I'm with, right? Or the manager that I'm with. I feel like a job is what you make of it, right? And, like you kind of know in the beginning if like you're going to be good at this or if you're going to learn what you need to learn. It's really more about the culture around the job and the other baggage that comes with either the company or the job. That I think that's what's really inspired me to move positions, right? I mean, people often say you don't leave a job, you leave a manager, right? So I think you leave a manager or you leave a culture when it doesn't work out. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
You've had a handful of, I'm trying to think, I don't know if we talked about this, but okay, so let's just estimate. You've had a handful of managers over the years.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts now as you are looking or as you put yourself in the situation of someone who is looking for a new job or a new manager? I guess put yourself in that situation. What do you look for when you're looking at identifying the right culture and identifying good traits in a manager? Because I don't know, I hear that. And I also agree that it's super important to find the right culture and the right manager. I'm just curious to know if you have a really analytical mindset.
So I've had really bad managers and I've had really good managers and I've had mediocre managers, right? So I think I think you have to understand like how you like to be managed. Are you someone who feels like they can go off and do the work on their own? And then if you need help that you can go escalate and get help? Are you someone who just needs direction all the time and just be told exactly what to do? And so I think it's really trying to understand a little bit more about yourself, the kind of style that you like working with, and then seek out a manager that way. So I've had managers who have been micromanagers who wanted to know every detail of what I was doing when I was at my doctor's appointment, etc. And then I've also had a manager, who promoted me after a 6-month maternity leave. And that just blew me away. And I am forever grateful for that manager. And he was a tough, strong manager, but it's like people who have your back and realize what you bring to the table and want to promote that and value that. I think that's essentially what you look for in a manager. And for me, it's like I just really want someone who can listen and support. Like that's what I need.
I like that idea of first being aware of yourself and what you like, what you need, and what you're looking for, and then
Mhm.
finding that, because good could be subjective. It could, so who's a good leader or a good manager for one person might not be a good manager for another person. And I think that's
Right.
super important, critical. I also
Yeah.
think it's probably a pretty good rule of thumb to look for people who are your champions, if you're your managers, when you're not in the room, like the person
Mhm.
you described when you came back from maternity leave. So
Right.
that's good. Um, okay, so if we could, I want to make sure that we don't miss anything on our timeline. So I want to, if we can, I know we've jumped forward to Microsoft a little bit, but also after you were a program manager, you decided to take a career break, right? So would it be
Mhm.
okay if we came back to this about where you decide to make the decision and go, okay, so you decided you wanted to go to business school. And was
Yep.
that pretty popular or common theme within your group at Microsoft, or was this somewhat
I
unique?
don't think so. I don't think it
Okay.
was popular at that time, but I was working on a couple of version 1 products, and I was working on trying to figure out like who our customer was going to be, what we were going to price the product as, how we were going to integrate with other products. And those were just things that I just didn't feel like I had the skill set to work on. So I decided to take a 2-year break, went off to business school. At that time, I really wanted to bring technology to the emerging markets. And so that's what I wrote about in my business school essays. And I had a great time. I actually spent that summer in business school working in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and I worked for Sony in Tokyo. So I got some great international experience. And yeah, it was an amazing experience. And then, like I mentioned, I got married to a great guy out here in Seattle. And so I moved back to Seattle and started again at Microsoft and worked in the finance organization. Uh, yeah, that was kind of career 1.5, I guess you would call it. um, yeah, it was interesting going from engineering to the business side. I think because then you meet with I supported a lot of executives after finance. I worked in mergers and acquisitions, and then you get to really see how executives make decisions and how you actually drive the business. So
It's interesting. I think the different kind of microcultures within Microsoft.
mhm.
Or would you be open to talking at all about your experience working in South Africa and was it Tokyo?
Yeah, it was so long ago, Jeff. I don't even know what to say.
Well, let's start with who are you working for in South Africa? Do you
Yeah,
remember?
so I worked for an amazing organization called Endeavor, and Endeavor, just like kind of, is it doctor? It's not doctor. Geez. It's not Doctors Without Borders, but it's like an organization that puts MBA students with entrepreneurs in emerging markets.
Oh wow.
And so, because I had a goal of trying to bring technology to the emerging markets at that time, I found this internship with Endeavor, and they paired me up with a small startup in South Africa. And I worked for them in Johannesburg for about 8 weeks. And it was a really great experience. South Africa is a beautiful country. We could do a whole podcast just on South Africa and my experience there. But yeah, so I worked with them for about 8 weeks, helping them with improve some of their processes, etc. And then that same summer, I worked in Tokyo, which is a completely different country than South Africa. And I worked for Sony. I worked for the Sony Vio team. And I didn't speak Japanese, and my boss didn't speak English. And so it was 8 weeks of me doing a little work, but really just kind of enjoying Tokyo by myself for 8 weeks, which was phenomenal. Like Tokyo is my most favorite city in the world, I think. And I can't wait to go back there and take my kids there. But Japan is phenomenal. My husband and I both love Japanese culture. We climbed Mount Fuji. We were engaged at that time, so we climbed Mount Fuji in the middle of the night to get to the top at sunset. So it was great. Yeah,
What an adventure. I mean, and these were both in your summer between year one and year two.
exactly.
Wow, quite an adventure.
Yeah. And I really encourage anyone who has a chance to go work internationally, either in school or in their career, to do so, because everything is global these days. And,
Yeah.
you really have to, your customers are global, your supply chain is global, and just having that experience is just so invaluable. So I would love to do it again. We had thought about doing it when our kids were in middle school, but that's when COVID had hit. And so we kind of lost that opportunity. But I think when my kids are in college, I would love to go visit and live in another country again.
It sounds like this is a pretty important time for you. I mean, did you get you had a goal going into business school? Did you get what you wanted out of it? Did you feel like you really gained those skills and the things that you needed to go back and be successful? Or
Yeah. So I would say with business school, and I think with any school, it's not necessarily always about the skills, because you
sure.
can learn everything online these days. And, you can take classes at a community college and you can learn how to code, or you can take an accounting class on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. But I think what school is really valuable for is learning how to break down problems. But more importantly, it's the network that you develop in school. And so I didn't appreciate it as much when I was in business school. And I went to Wharton, and it's a great school out in Philadelphia. I didn't appreciate it enough or value it enough at that time. But since then, I have tapped into my business school network like you wouldn't believe it. So I think every job that I've gotten in the last few years has been through my business school network. If I've ever needed anything, I've reached out to that network. And I think that's probably what's been the most valuable thing about, especially business school, is really the people that you are surrounded with, and the people who come after you. So
Did you jump right in when you showed up in Philadelphia to business school? Did you feel like, oh, this is like I feel right here? Was there like a little bit of that
Oh,
getting
no, it was
comfortable?
very intimidating. It was very intimidating because I was an engineer and I'm surrounded by people who worked at Goldman Sachs and McKinsey. And I remember, it's quite embarrassing to share this story, but I remember during our orientation, I walked to a bar in Philadelphia and I saw everybody mingling and networking. And then I turned around and walked right out and I walked back home, because just the idea of trying to network and schmooze and make small talk with people I didn't know, it was quite terrifying. I've gotten over that, thank God. But yeah, it was not, it was quite an adjustment for me, especially coming from an engineer and going over to the business side. It's a very different type of person that you're working with or you're dealing with. And I think, a lot of people who come out from business school these days do go work for tech companies, working at, the big FANG companies, et cetera. I know that's a goal for them. So, but yeah, it was definitely something that I had to get comfortable with, that
I'm
new
gl-
world.
I'm glad that you called that out, because if someone looked at your experience on paper, I mean,
Yeah.
you first of all, they accepted you into the school because they knew that you were qualified and smart enough. You had the experience, everything else there.
Yeah.
You had gone to a great school undergrad in Columbia. You worked at Microsoft in 1999 at the end of the dot-com boom. Microsoft's a great company there at the
Mhm.
time, still are a great company. And then you showed up at this school, but still we're dealing with these feelings of, oh goodness, maybe I'm not ready to be here, or just only maybe some self-doubt.
Yeah.
And if you look at it on paper, I think no one would think, well, yeah, that person would not have any reason to feel that way. But the reality is everybody feels that way. Everybody
Yeah.
feels at some point like, oh, this is terrifying. I don't know if I should
Mhm.
be here. These people are all better, smarter than me, or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad that you called that out. So how did you work through that? You went to school at some point and you didn't just yeah, again, you made it through the next 2 years. So the orientation
Yeah.
was a moment you're like, okay, back off here. But I mean, can you talk me through
Well,
what?
I think you have to find, wherever you go, you have to find your tribe,
Okay,
right? You have to
yeah,
find the people who are going to be your friends, who are going to walk into that bar with you next time, or who are going to be the first person that you go say hello to at that bar, or the people that you're going to be in your learning group with, the people that you're going to do case interviews with when you're studying for, your consulting interviews. Like, you just have to find your tribe. And I think that's like important in school, but that's important wherever you go, right? Like in your career, I have to find my tribe in my children's school. Like, who are the other moms who I relate to? I think like that is the key to everything. I honestly think that is the key to happiness, is finding your tribe. Whether it be your friends, the people in your family that you're most you go to for help, whether it be people in your clergy or your church. It's finding those people who are going to support you and lift you up. And, I was very lucky in business school to find, a few people that I have made part of my tribe. And then I think as you get more confidence, right? Like I graduated I think when I was 29 and I got married right after that. I think when you're in your 30s, that's really when you kind of establish in yourself and you understand who you are a little bit more, and you understand like, okay, I got to play politics in the corporate world a little bit, or I got to be a little bit more strategic in how I navigate myself, or I got to understand about like presenting my brand, or presenting like, figuring out which opportunities that I need to take. I think when you're in 20s, you just do what your boss tells you to do. But in your 30s, that's when you like really try to figure out like, okay, this is going to be helpful. This is not going to be helpful. This is the gap that I need to fill in my resume. These are the experiences that I need to get. I just had a baby, so I need to step back for a little bit, that type of thing. But yeah, I would say wherever you go, find your tribe, find the people who are going to help you.
I think that's really valuable advice. So you obviously found your tribe, part of them at when you
Yeah.
were in grad school. Were there any more of those moments where between this moment of orientation and then feeling comfortable, where you remember walking into a room, or just, I mean, I guess, yeah, how did that happen? How did you go about finding? I feel like there's a distance traveled between those two moments, and I'm just curious if you have any more experiences that helped you get whatever you needed internally to be able to take the steps to travel that distance.
Okay, so I would say that a couple of the things that I did in business schools was we had this thing called leadership ventures. And two of the most profound things that I did was I did a leadership venture at Quantico, which is the military academy at
Oh,
Washington,
wow.
D.C.
That's cool.
And I did a sailing leadership venture in the Caribbean, which sounds amazing. But I'm telling you, you learn so much about leadership sailing with a team of people through a storm, right? And I think that outside of like classroom work, being in those experiences just really helped me understand a little bit more of why I was here. I'm not here to learn about accounting or learn about how to create a marketing plan. Those are things that you can learn about on the job. I'm here
Mhm.
to develop myself as a person, to develop myself as a leader.
Wow.
And then putting yourself in those situations, like working in Quantico, spending a weekend in Quantico, it was only a weekend, but I left me with such a profound appreciation for our military. And one of the exercises that we had to do was all of us had to make our bed. And if one of us made our bed wrong, all of us had to undo making our bed, put everything back in the cabinet, and then put everything back out. And the whole point of that exercise was to teach you that one person's mistake really impacts the rest of the team, right? And everybody there was just so wonderful and so gracious, but so brave and so about the team and really helping each other. I remember we had to we were given fake rifles, and we had to wade through this little pond to get to the other side. And there was a snake in the pond. And one of the military people who are our hosts immediately jumped into the lake and took care of the snake, right? And I was just like, there wasn't even a second thought. It wasn't even like, let me go get a stick. Oh, everybody get out, let's secure the situation or whatever. He just jumped in and he took care of the situation. And I just think of like, that is the mentality that they probably have when they're in a combat zone. And they're just jumping in, uh, unafraid to save the lives of, I'm sure it was an innocuous snake, but you know what I'm saying? But to like save the lives of the people around them, or to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And so I think like, and then like sailing through the Caribbean, you think it's a wonderful experience, and it was amazing. But I get a little bit seasick, and we had a couple of storms, right? And during that storm, we all had to work together to make sure that we were all safe. And all of us were like, I mean, this was like proper sailing with the jib and all that kind of stuff, right? And we're just out in the Caribbean. There's no like calling someone to get the Coast Guard to come get us. And we're sailing through a storm. And it was very clear like who the leaders were and who the followers were. And we just had to make sure that, everybody worked together to get through that storm. And so I think that was probably one of the most, those experiences where you build relationships with the people that you're with. And you understand what leadership is, you understand what your role is, and like, in any particular situation. I think those are the things that really are what's the most valuable takeaway through some of these like higher ed programs that people go through. I know there's
Wow.
there's a lot these days about people saying, in our politics and our culture, like, oh, education doesn't matter that much and you can just learn a trade and all of that kind of stuff. And all of that stuff is true. And I support that. Right. But I think that there's something to be said about taking a couple of years out and focusing on yourself and how you show up as a person, how you show up as a leader, building relationships, networking, understanding what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, etc. So it's not necessarily, again, about like accounting. It's just about, growing some of those softer emotional intelligence types of skills that I think really carry you forward in life.
I think there's so much truth in every single thing that you said.
Yeah.
And I think that finding some of those situations where you can put yourself, where you can, I think you can learn a lot about yourself by being in a stressful situation with a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
I think there's a ton of self development and growth. And I could imagine that being really, really helpful. So what did you learn about yourself when you were in those situations? Is anything, remember? I mean, I can tell by your passion and the energy that you spoke with about those, that they were
hmm
really, really impactful. Is there anything that stands out from those experiences?
I think what I learned is that I want to be a leader that people want to follow. And that is not easy. Finding your true authentic self is something that's been a journey, not just through business school, but post business school. When I was young in my career, I was told that I had to fight for a seat at the table. And then when I started fighting for a seat at the table, people told me I was pushy and aggressive. So I was a little confused. I was like, I don't understand. What do you want me to do? How do you want me to behave? Right. So, and I think women, frankly, have to deal with that a lot more than men. But finding your authentic voice is something that I have had to work through and, just really examine myself and examine situations and look at not only like, hey, I'm really analytical. Yeah, but being really analytical can also be taken as it can be perceived as being negative, right? So I think
Oh, yeah.
one of the things that you have to realize is that every one of your strengths can also be one of your weaknesses, right? If you're very determined, if you're very steadfast, that can also be perceived as stubborn. So just really understanding who you are, what your strengths are, what can they be perceived as, understanding things that you don't know where you're going to need other people to help fill in those gaps. Kind of, just it's not a one-time thing. It's not like I came out of business school and now I'm a wonderful leader and I can be, the CEO of a company. It is a journey. And then your kids, of course, throw you to the loop because the things that you do at work just don't work with your family or your children, right? So, yeah, I think like learning how to be a leader, learning learning about resilience, figuring out how you present yourself in the world, how you're perceived. It's all a journey and it changes over time.
Wow. You know what? Actually, before we move on, I have a question about
Mhm.
just business school in general, what your thoughts are. I loved business school for all of the reasons you described. I learned a lot about myself. It provided opportunity. I love the network, the people, the friendships, the relationships that I made. I love the most. That said, I've thought a lot about, the opportunity cost and the value received from business school, how it would be now versus a bunch of years ago.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on if someone came to you and asked, "Hey, Himani, I'm thinking about going to business school. Could be, any school. What's your perspective on that now?"
Yeah, no. So I think that, my husband and I have a philosophy that education is never a bad thing. And whether you end up doing the thing that you went to school for, it doesn't really matter. But I think like
Okay.
education is probably the most valuable gift that you can get for yourself or that you can give your children or anyone else in life, right? And so that's one of the things that I like to focus on is making sure that children, especially underdeserved children, have an opportunity to get educated to the extent that they want to and and help provide that.
Is this a volunteer effort that you're involved in? You're helping
No,
making
no,
sure
no.
that, or is
It's
this
like I try to donate my money to children overseas so that they just have an opportunity to get education, because I think that's like one of the key ways to get out of poverty. And
yeah.
I know that there's lots of initiatives where like, hey, you should just go buy businesses and, you should learn a trade and you don't need to go to, higher education and Ivy League schools are overrated and all that kind of stuff. And I get that perspective completely. And I think that, whatever the path is for you to take, I think you should go take it. I think for me, business school, again, was not necessarily learning accounting. I think I was the bottom 10% of my class in accounting. But I think it's really the people who come through your doors, right? When I was at Columbia University, I was in the elevator elevator with George Stephanopoulos, and I just froze. And if I was in an elevator with him again, I would have been like, hey, I would love to have coffee with you and have you tell me about what it was like to work in the White House in the Clinton administration. Right. And so when I was in business school, we had the CEO of Starbucks come in. We had the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff come in, not to our school, but to our classroom. Right. So like my professor knew him personally and invited him to our classroom. And so I think like, and then again,
Wow.
like all of my classmates are an amazing place right now. Right. And so I think again, it's not really about the book learning, because you can learn that from Wikipedia. Now you can learn that from ChatGPT, but it's really about developing those relationships, learning from other people and listening to speakers speak. I think that's what's the really most valuable about higher education. And I know a lot of that has become democratized. I mean, just by doing podcasts, we can hear from great leaders in the world. And so I appreciate that. And I think that there's multiple ways that you can get to where you want to go. But I personally believe, my father, like I mentioned, was the only one in his family who was educated to the level that he was. Because he got an opportunity to get a PhD in the UK, he was able to move to the UK and then eventually into the US, right? So I always fundamentally believe that if you have an opportunity to get further education, and if you have that passion, and if you have the financial means, because I know it's expensive, and if you have the ability to take a couple of years off to go explore something, then you should do that. It's certainly not, I think like there were so many people who went to community college who could code way better than I can, or there's so many people who are way better accountants than I will ever be. But I just think that network has been invaluable in those experiences. And, just like I said, going through Quantico and going to, a sailing leadership venture, like those are memories that I will never replace.
That is special. I think that's really unique to be able to leverage a business school experience to be able to do a couple of things that I feel like the only other people I've known or heard about going to Quantico are people who are like actually training.
Yeah.
And so I think to be able to do that as part of your business school experience is pretty unique, and I can definitely see the value there. Okay, so but you left, you finished, you graduated, you just again, you might have been in the bottom 10% of your accounting class, which also puts you in a great category anyway. I mean, but still, you finished up, you got your degree, your diploma, and you moved on. And did you meet your now husband while you were in Philadelphia at grad school?
No, so he and I worked together when we were in SharePoint. It was
Okay,
a true office romance.
it's clever. I get it. I could.
Yes, you get it.
Yeah, it's good.
So we met at Microsoft, and then I went off to business school and we did long distance for a couple of years. And then I was like, hey, if you want me to move back to Seattle, we had to have a little bit more of a commitment. And so we did that, and then we got engaged, and then we got married, I think within a month after I graduated from business school.
Nice. So
Yeah.
got back, got engaged, got married, and you're back in the Pacific Northwest. And
Mhm.
was it an easy transition back to Microsoft, or does it? I mean, how?
It wasn't at first, because I felt like, hey, I just got this fancy MBA and I'm kind of back where I started. And even though it was a different role, it was in finance. I was like, wait, is this what I went there for? And so I think Seattle, and so this was about 20 years ago. I think Seattle was a little smaller in terms of the corporate opportunities available than it is now. It's certainly super amazing right now in terms of different industries, from aerospace to tech to pharmaceuticals, right? So I think 20 years ago we were still growing, and so there was a little bit of like is this really what I want to do, or is this there's a little bit of resentment, I guess I would say. But I think it all worked out. I had some great opportunities at Microsoft. I worked in M&A. I worked with you, and it was so much fun doing M&A transactions. I got to go to Israel. When I was in finance, I went to China. I had some, I talked about bringing technology to the emerging markets. And so I really had an opportunity to do some international work. I got to work with executives. So at the end, I don't regret the path that I took. But initially it was a little bit challenging.
I could see that. I mean,
Yeah.
that would there's some complexities or conflicting feelings. I could see why that is the case, because to your point, you've been there, you left, and now you're back. And you made the decisions, you're there, but then also it could feel a little bit like, well, I don't know. I could see that feeling just
Yeah. It's
feeling
hard. I think
complex.
for everybody, not just business school, sometimes it's hard being a boomerang employee,
Sure.
right? Because you're like, wait, I've already done this. Do I want to do this again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that. So, but you powered through and you went back in finance, but your job, like you said, we met each other when you were working at M&A, but your job didn't start in M&A. What was your first corporate finance job?
So I worked in Windows OEM finance. And
Okay.
so I was responsible for about $20 billion of revenue that Microsoft got through the sale of Windows to OEM partners like Dell and HP.
Because you can't be
Um,
trusted. Only $20 billion because you
Only
can't be
$20 billion,
trusted.
yeah. You know, at that time, this was before cloud. And so Windows and Office were the cash cows of Microsoft. And so it was a really, really important
Yeah.
business. And Steve Ballmer was the CEO at that time. And so the PC numbers were super important. And so that's really what we focused on, is trying to forecast and set targets for Windows and Office sales for Microsoft.
Yeah, that's significant responsibility. So
Mhm.
when you came back, was a different role? Was it also, so for people who are listening, Microsoft roles are listed often at levels. There's a title and a level. Was your role the same level, or was it a level higher, or a
One
level
level
higher?
higher.
It was a
One
level
level
higher.
higher
So,
than
okay.
when I
So it was
left.
technically a
Yeah.
promotion, but okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Because you come back, you're level higher, you're working Windows OEM finance. How did you end up going into M&A? How did that kind of door open for
Well,
you?
I didn't want to be a CFO in the long term. Again,
Okay.
bottom 10% of accounting. And so I didn't want to be a CFO in the long term. And so I was looking for roles, and it was, at a certain point, it was time to move. And so I came across the M&A function. It was a team called Venture Integration, and I moved into that role. And it was kind of someone who, uh, is quarterbacking an M&A transaction. And so that was the role I stepped into. And it was probably the most fun job that I had at Microsoft. And I was in that role for about 6 years, and worked on about 20 different transactions, got to travel the world a little bit, made some amazing friends who I'm still friends with today. And yeah, I loved it.
That's a lot of deals.
Yeah.
Any that stand out that you could think of that you liked,
Well, I
that
kind
you
of became
remember?
the Israeli deal expert for a little
Okay.
bit. So we did about 5 transactions in Israel. So we were acquiring a bunch of security engineers, and I kind of, my husband's Jewish, and so I wanted to learn a little bit more about the culture, and so I, volunteered to do kind of the Israel deals, and became a little bit of an expert there. And so that was probably the most fun. I got to go to Israel twice, swam in the Dead Sea, etc.
That's cool.
And ate the best falafels I've ever had on the coast of Tel Aviv. And I hope to go back there and bring my kids and my husband. But yeah, it was so fun. It was so fun. I almost
That
wish I had that job later in life, so I would retire in that job. But
seriously,
yeah,
I could see that.
yeah,
Well, maybe that's the next pivot for you. You never know. Back in M&A, but would you mind, for those who aren't familiar, could you break down kind of the core? And I'm putting you on the spot here, so
yeah.
it's okay. But can you mind breaking down from your view how an M&A team works, and the difference between, this is something I struggled with for a long time, probably still do, the difference between the team that you were talking about that you're quarterbacking, and then kind of the upstream team, like the business development and the corporate development teams, and
Yeah.
how that works at a big organization?
Yeah. So instead of talking about teams, maybe we can talk about the deal cycle a little
Sure,
bit.
perfect. Yeah,
So I think
that's
the
great.
first thing, because it's different in different companies, but the
Yeah.
first thing that you need deal sourcing. And so
Okay.
basically, there's organic growth and inorganic growth. So M&A is considered inorganic growth. And so when you're looking for a company to buy, there's a group of people, usually it's biz dev or it's corp dev. And these are the people that are trying to understand 2 things. One, what does the company need? So
Okay.
where are the gaps in the technology that we have today? And, what do we think that we want to go buy potentially? And then 2, you want to understand the market landscape and understand all the different companies, from the startups to the late stage companies, that may be interesting things that we could buy in the future. So they kind of develop what we call the deal pipeline. And so that's kind of biz dev or corp dev. At Microsoft, it was biz dev, but at the next company it was corp dev. Once you decide that you want to go buy a company, then you have to go approach them, right? So then you go approach them, you reach out and you say, hey, I'm from corp dev at Microsoft. I want to understand if we can partner together. I'd love to learn a little bit more about your technology, about your sales operations, etc. And so you have a couple of meetings. And it's just kind of like, it's an intro meeting, you sign an NDA, you learn a little bit more about the company, whatever they're willing to share with you. And, you try to understand a little bit more about their financials, how much they think that they're going to be selling themselves for, et cetera. And you really try to build those relationships and see if they would be a good fit for you to go acquire. And then if they are, you raise that question like, hey, would you be open to an acquisition? There's also other things that you may do at this point. You may look to see if partnership is better. And so you may go into a biz dev partnership and see if there are better opportunities to work together that way as two separate entities. Or you may see, you may decide to walk away and you may decide to build that technology yourself. And you may say like, hey, this is not really what I was looking for, or it may not be at the right price, et cetera. And so you decide to build that yourself. But if you do decide to go acquire them, you can then make them an offer. And so usually Corp Dev makes some sort of preliminary offer that is dependent on the findings of due diligence. So it's just like when you put an offer on a house, it's contingent upon you doing an inspection. And so that's due diligence is the same concept. You're doing an inspection of the company to make sure that there's no, issues or like, I forget the word, but like things that are potentially going to be a problem. So you spend about 45 to 60 days, actually 30 to 60 days doing due diligence. And then once you feel comfortable, once the executives that you're buying the company for feel comfortable, then you go ahead and you close the transaction. And then after you close that transaction, you focus on integration. So making sure that company can, bringing the people over, bringing the technology over, bringing the customers over, and bringing the back office over, and just really integrating that company within your company. So I think of it as like two people getting married. They have two sets of bills, they have, two sets of furniture, and you kind of like, you decide whose house, well, clearly it's going to be the acquirer's house, but you're moving the other person into the acquirer's house, and then you help them set up shop there. So that's kind of the whole deal process. But there are lots of different people involved, including outside counsel, inside counsel, functional experts within the company, the target company, the executives. I mean, it's a whole gamut of people.
You mentioned something I'm wondering about if you could explain. I'll read sometimes a PR release about a deal that's been announced, and it'll say this deal is something expected to close blank. So deal has been signed but expected to close. What's the difference between a deal being signed and then it actually being closed?
Yeah. So when a deal is signed, that's when you say that you're going to buy the company.
Okay.
But before you buy it, you're going to have to do a couple of remediation steps, right? So in our case at Microsoft, oftentimes it had to do with fixing any security bugs or issues, making sure things are patched up, taking care of any commitments that you need to take care of with existing customers, because typically when the acquirer wants to acquire the company, they want to make sure that they're starting off with kind of a healthy, clean slate and not taking a lot of baggage on. And so usually that time between sign and close, and it can be, it can be 0 days or it can be a year. But it's really that time for the company that's being acquired to do any sort of cleanup that they need to do before they move over. Yeah.
Well, thanks that was a really effective breakdown. I've never, for whatever reason, I never thought about it from the perspective of diligence being similar to a home inspection, but that's a great analogy. And I think people can really relate to that. It's a great point. And maybe it takes a little longer than your home inspection, but that's a good example. During due diligence, something I liked about it is there are interesting problems to solve. Can you ever think of any unique or interesting situations that arise that you can speak of during your M&A time?
I think the most interesting things had to do with a lot of international law. So sometimes in like Israel, we dealt with a lot of things around tax and dealing with specific tax situations. And luckily we had great tax attorneys that could help us navigate that. Or sometimes in Europe, there are very unique employment labor laws that you have to navigate. You don't like to lay off people, but if you have to lay off people, sometimes these countries have different labor situations that you have to work through. So those were kind of the major deals issues that we had to, aside from like technology remediation, fixing security bugs and things like that. But I would say like those are the main categories of things that you had to deal with. But I don't think I've ever come across anything too crazy. There weren't any like dead bodies buried in the company backyard or anything. You certainly have to deal with personalities. Like you're
Sure.
dealing with startup founders who have big egos and big expectations and big dreams. And so, one of the things that I have learned, and it was actually one of the acquiring general managers who kind of really taught me that, is like when you're acquiring a company, you want to preserve that value. You don't want to squash it with your big company, Bigfoot. And so really find out what makes that company unique. Is it the way they do design? Is it the way their customer following? Like figure out really what's unique about that company and really focus on trying to nurture that and value that, and not just kind of do the big company paper mache over it. So that's
That's a really good point.
those are some of the things I had to focus on.
I mean, that what you said is so it's intuitive, right? You're buying something
Yeah.
because it has value. You're putting a value on it and you're acquiring it. So keep that. Don't immediately try to change it and make it exactly like the other things that you already have.
Mhm.
It's let it stay. I think
Yeah.
it's intuitive, but also hard. I mean, there's a lot of complexity that goes there with business.
Yeah.
Um,
And I don't know if
that's
you
neat.
want to, I mean, we could talk a lot about that, but like, I don't know if you want to talk about it, because I feel like Microsoft, we tend to like, just like snap it into the mothership and
Mhm.
do things a certain way. Right. And,
Yeah.
I know the very specific acquisition where this guy, he was very particular about, he wanted very special pillows in his office. I don't know if you remember this deal, but it was
I don't remember this one.
Adullam in Israel.
Okay. We'll
He
leave that
wanted to
out.
have he wanted to have a clothes party that costed like $30,000, and we just wanted to give him like a little dinner, right? And then um, he was very particular about the office design, right? And he wanted certain pillows, and he wanted his guys to be able to go play soccer and then come back in and have showers on a particular floor and not have to go with their towels to the floor above them. It was a thing. And we were getting frustrated, right? And the GM of that group was just like, look, like his products are beautiful. Like his products are like Apple products. And we can't put like a Microsoft, we can't like take away, like this is who he is. This is the
Yeah.
essence of him. And we can't come in and like slap this Microsoft bureaucratic process on him and take that away from him. So let him have the pillows, let him have the party to some reason, right?
It's a great point in that was a big part of their culture. Like you got to leave.
Yeah.
You don't want to tarnish this beautiful thing that someone else has built. That's neat. Okay, so Himani, so after you were done with your time at Microsoft working at M&A, you made a big change and you left big tech and went somewhere else.
Yeah. So after Microsoft, I went to a small company called Aptio, and I worked there for a couple of years, also doing M&A work. But then we got acquired by private equity, and so the writing was kind of on the wall. And so then I started looking for my next role, and that's when I landed my last full-time W-2 role, which was working at Discovery Corporation. And Discovery, from the Food Network, Oprah Winfrey Network, HGTV, et cetera. And so they were building their streaming product here in the Seattle area. And so I started working as the chief of staff to the CTO. And
Oh, wow.
then it was so fun. It was so fun. My very first company, All Hands, and it was actually during COVID, Oprah showed up.
Oh, come
And
on.
yeah, I know. It
That's
was
so
amazing.
cool.
And even though I was like one of 1,000 people on a Zoom, but I was still on a Zoom call with Oprah. So yeah, so that that happened.
That's really cool.
And then we merged about a year and a half later. We merged with Warner Media, and so we got CNN and we got HBO, and that was a really, really interesting time. Speaking of, it was small company buying a big company, and that had its own unique challenges, etc. And that was also super fun. I got to go down to the Warner Brothers lot, got to see where they shot Abbott Elementary, got to sit on the friend's couch, etc. And so that was also really fun. But unfortunately, with any big merger, they had to find billions of dollars of synergies. And so, my time ended there after about 3 years. And, now for the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot of nonprofit work. I had the chance to consult with the Gates Foundation, and I've been doing a bunch of pro bono nonprofit consulting. I joined a nonprofit board, and this is kind of what I'm calling Career 2.0 for now.
Something that you mentioned earlier was how all of your experiences have been beneficial. It's the creative is the word that comes to mind. It's not the word used,
Yeah.
but what's come to mind. Did your experience working buy side M&A at Microsoft, how did that influence working on the sell side when you were with Aptio when you all got acquired? Was that a hard perspective shift to be the seller?
To be honest with you, I didn't get a chance to work on that transaction.
Oh, okay.
So that was all done secret at the CEO level,
Okay.
right? Yeah.
Okay.
But we certainly
Wow.
had to go through the growing pains of like, oh, we just got acquired. We have a new boss. We kind of had to like not re-interview, but kind of prove ourselves for our jobs again. So
Oh, that's
yeah,
gotta be. I bet that gives you a lot of little empathy for going through
for
that
sure.
process now, because
For sure.
that's hard.
Yeah.
Oh man. Wow. Um, well, so you've had the commonality there then is that you've had an ability to keep a right perspective. And I feel like, I don't know, what's helped you keep your perspective aligned all the way along? I mean, as so many different changes and so many challenges, you stayed resilient. There's something there. And I'd love to hear you talk about it a little if you don't mind.
You know, I think one of the things that really carries me forward in resilience, and this is one of the things I'd like to, I think about when I think about perspective, is that, I've always been very fortunate in life and we come from a place of privilege, right? So when people talk about how stressful they are and how busy they are, I'm always reminded that like the real busy person is a single mom working multiple jobs, right? And so we have been very fortunate to participate in an industry that promotes profit sharing, um, and that promotes growth, and that there's lots of opportunities to move around. And so I think that's also been something that I've really, really been grateful for. And so, I have a husband who's employed as well. And, you know, I feel like we often take that for granted, or sometimes when we live in places like Seattle or San Francisco, we're in our little bubbles and we don't realize that life is way harder out there. And so that's something that I use to keep me grounded, is just to have perspective. And I often think about like Steve Jobs at this time. Like he had all the money in the world, right? And he had the best personal chefs and the best personal doctors that he could buy. And he passed at a really, really young age, and it was tragic. And he passed of cancer. And so, I'm always reminded that nothing is more important than your health, your family, your community. And we're all lucky to be where we are. And I don't want to discount people who are, have to put food at the table, or we just went through the shutdown. And, I know that there's so many people, like I'm just reminded of all the people who have been struggling. So my struggles have been nothing compared to really what so many people face in this country and also in the world. And then that's just something that I try to remind myself of. I'm
I
sorry to
think
get corny on you, but
that was not corny. It
yeah,
was really important. And thank you. I agree with what you're saying. That's not easy though. So how do
yeah,
you go about reminding yourself to be grateful? Because I like what you're saying. And I think that's what you're saying is I have a lot to be grateful for. And other people have it worse than I do. Maybe some people have it better in some ways, but regardless, I have stuff to be grateful for. So yeah,
yeah.
how do you go about that? How do you keep it?
I think you have to constantly remind yourself. You have to constantly remind yourself that your problems are manageable. Whether I have a bad boss or whether, I didn't get the promotion or that type of thing. That's just something I'm the oldest child. I'm a child of immigrants. And I think like, I grew up with a little bit of a scarcity mindset. And so that's just something that I constantly remind myself of. I often see sometimes my friends complaining, oh, like little Johnny had to go to school after a red eye from Hawaii. And I'm like, well, there are kids who are sleeping in their car every day and are going to school.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's just something I try to remind myself, is that, I'm just very fortunate. I remember when I gave birth to my twins, I had the best healthcare, and that there are people who are giving birth on the floor of a hut with no anesthesia, no medicine, etc. And so that's just something I've always tried to live, is just remind myself of like having gratitude as a key value. And that's one of the reasons kind of in this career 2.0, I'm looking at doing nonprofit work and just trying to leave the world a better place.
I really respect that. And I think that we could all do a little better at finding ways to be grateful and trying to do our own part to leave the
Mhm.
world a little bit better, a little bit of a better place. I think, yeah, thanks for going there. Thank you. Um, so as you've worked through, you mentioned something, a while ago that just kind of, I think it felt like a little bit of a side comment about how your network has been so powerful for you. As you said that, and I'm bringing it back, I'm thinking about this other experience that you shared about walking to the bar and then, your first day during orientation in Philly and immediately walking out. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the importance of networking and how you got there, and just any advice you have for people on how to go about networking.
Yeah. Well, I've recently become very passionate about this subject, especially while I'm trying to figure out my career 2.0. And I think that one of the things that I didn't do when I was in business school was network. Like that should have been my number one focus, was to network and build those relationships. And so now when I talk to people, like I'm always like, come from a place of yes, take every phone call, take every conversation, always be kind. Because you never know where that person's going to end up. And I'd love to share a few examples. So
Please.
I remember when I was working in finance at Microsoft, there was a brand new hire who was a junior guy, right? And I didn't really pay much attention to him. I knew that he was smart, but like I didn't really invest in that relationship. I could have mentored him. I could have, gone out to lunch with him more often. I could have checked in with him. Fast forward 6 years later, he's a CEO of his own startup, and I'm reaching out to him to talk about job opportunities, right? So you never know where people are going to end up. And even in like, not just job situation, but just in the last few weeks, I was chaperoning my daughter's school field trip to the University of Washington. And I was sitting next to another mom on the bus. And on the surface level, she just looked like a normal stay-at-home mom who volunteers at the school, etc. But we started talking. I started being more open about myself, and she started becoming more open about herself. I found out that she runs 5 businesses. She's a real estate magnate. She's into commercial real estate. She runs a whole bunch of local businesses around here. Her and her husband, her husband is ex Google, and she's looking to buy more businesses. And on the surface level, you think like, what people are on the surface is not necessarily like who they are underneath. And so I'm always like, be curious. And so I'm so fortunate that we had that conversation, and we're actually going to go to dinner this weekend with our husbands. But I think like every LinkedIn request, not everyone, but like as much as you can.
Be careful. Be careful.
Yeah, be careful.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, when young people reach out to you asking you for mentor, like networking is not just about networking, at a professional conference or anything like that. It's about reaching out, like helping and mentor the young people who come to you looking for advice, because you never know when they're going to end up. You never know when your kids are going to end up looking for jobs, and you're going to be like, oh, I met this, I spoke to this one woman who worked at Boeing a few years ago. Let me reach out to her because my son is really interested in aviation. So I'm 100% make sure you network as much as possible, whether it be through school, whether it be professional, your personal life, your kids' education, the people that you meet at school, etc. It is so important to continue to build that network, to feed into that network, to say yes more than you say no. It's so easy now. You can have 30-minute Zoom conversations. It costs you so little for you to build a start of a relationship, right? Opportunities are opening up to me because of that network that I am actively trying to build. And so if that's one thing I would encourage to people, is to really, really focus on that, building that network and cultivating it.
It's a vulnerable situation to be in, like, to say, paraphrasing, I need help. And whether that is, hey, I'm looking for a job. I just want to meet you. I just want to talk to you. I just want to ask your advice.
Yeah.
It's a vulnerable situation. But do you find that people generally want to help?
I think they do. I think if they do, especially if you make some sort of personal connection.
Yes.
Right. And
I 100% think that's so true. Yes.
Yeah. 100%. And I think especially in this time, we're in a really weird job market situation right now. We're in a really weird environment. And I think that, it's a weird time with so many people trying to network with you, et cetera. But really take that effort, because you don't know what position you're going to end up in, 6 months down the line, 6 years down the line.
That's so true. Yeah. I think that's spot on. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for sharing all those perspectives. I really, really enjoyed getting to hear this part of your story. I know there's so much more to it. Thanks for coming on and being open and sharing your insights and advice and your criminal history, and just giving people all the background on you as a person, a little of the background on you as a person. I think I think there's a lot of value in here, and I think people are really going to enjoy this. So thank you so much for taking the time. And yeah, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. It's been so much fun talking to you, and I can't wait till we have a chance to meet in person so I can give you a high five.